this is part 2 of my third guitar build. If you watched the first video, I did mention at the beginning that this will be a 2-part series. Well, it didn't turn out that way. I ran out of card room on my camera, so I had to get all those videos off of it so I could start fresh. So this is going to be a 3-part series now, so sorry about that, but it is what it is. You can see me cutting out the shape of the headstock here. I've got the template on the back, and that makes it easy to be able to follow that with the bandsaw. And while the template's on, I do mark for the holes so that I can drill them out. Before drilling them though, I do shape the headstock first using the oscillating spindle sander. And here's the drilling of the tuner holes. That's a piece of ebony on the back strap, and there's actually a piece of maple under that. And on the front here, that's Malaysian blackwood, and underneath it are a couple of veneers. Here I'm cutting the neck off at the end of the tenon, and then bringing it to the bandsaw and cutting out the rough taper. Then I take it over to the Morrison tenon cutting jig and cut a Morrison to the top of the guitar body. There you can see the mortise. After that, I cut a tenon into the end of the neck that'll fit right down into the mortise. Like so. And after, fitting it, it's pretty tight. My first 2 guitars were really tight like this as well. And you can see it's tight enough where I can kind of hold the guitar up by it, but it did end up loosening up over time, which is no problem. It's just, I don't know if that's just wood movement, but I didn't have that with my first 2 guitars. I just noticed that with this one. And before I bolt on the neck, I like to check the yaw and the pitch against the body just to make sure everything looks good still. While I'm checking that, I just tied the neck onto the body with a piece of rubber strapping. And you can see I did have to floss the neck a little bit to one side so that would lean one way. And once I was satisfied, I went ahead and bolted it on. So here I'm adding the truss rod, and I had to cut the access hole for the truss rod. And I don't know why I decided to do it with a chisel. I just did. The first 2 guitars, I used a router, and it was a lot quicker and easier. For some reason I thought this would be faster. It ended up taking me a little while because I was being so careful. I didn't want to accidentally hit the top of the guitar. Honestly, I probably should have protected the guitar a little bit, but it turned out okay. And the truss rod fit right down in there. Then I had to prepare the fretboard, and before starting I like to make sure there's a nice square edge to reference from. So that's what you see me doing here, squaring up the edge. And that's a number 5 jack plane, low angle jack plane, by the way. Then I referenced that square edge against the miter gauge on my table saw. I cut a clean square front of the fretboard. Then I thickness it to where it needs to be, rough thickness, and then I cut all the frets out. You can see here using this fretting jig. This is the jig from LMI, which at the time of this recording, they just announced recently that they were closing down after 40 years of business. So the 2 templates I have for this jig, I guess will be the only templates I ever have, unless somebody decides to pick up their jig line and sell it separately, which would be cool. Once the frets are cut, I cut out the taper on the fretboard and then get it to final thickness. Of course, I use that same plane to do it. The plane is really nice to have. You know, I only really use that one and a little block plane, and that's really the only two planes that you really need. I could use a number 7, I think, for joining the plates at the beginning of a guitar build, but really just a number 5 and a little block plane is really all I've needed. There I cut the end of the fretboard to length. Decided to put a little curve in the bottom of it. Had to plan for the thickness of the binding as well, which I added here off camera. I'm just taking off the binding tape. And that binding is Kowa binding, and that fretboard is a Malaysian Blackwood, just like the head plate, the fretboard, and the bridge. They were all the same. I use a flush cut saw and just really slowly and carefully cut off the edge of that binding at the top of the fretboard. I haven't had any issues yet doing it that way. To attach the fretboard, I drilled 3 holes, alignment holes, that I put a little drill bit down inside of to place the fretboard, so that when I put the glue on, those pin holes will help me to align it onto the neck and it won't shift or anything like that when I glue it. I almost forgot the truss rod here. I had to run out and go get it after I put the glue on the fretboard, so that's why I left the screen and came back. I've heard of people doing that. Of course, this is just my 3rd guitar. I haven't done it yet, but I actually almost did forget to put it in my 2nd guitar and then again in this one, so I'm just dreading the day that I actually do forget to put the truss rod in. This is a piece of ebony, and that's actually the cutoff of the end of the fretboard of my 1st guitar. I just thought it would be nice to use as a heel cap. And when I put the heel cap on, using these kind of quick clamps, can cause the piece to slide around. And I didn't know it yet, but it actually slid the left side of the heel cap up just a skosh. So later when I'm about to glue the fretboard to the guitar, I ended up having to floss both sides down a little bit to get that gap out. Now I'm shaping the neck, all of the various sequences there. I decided to use this little drill press planer to get it to closer to thickness. It was a lot easier. Actually, it didn't take nearly as long as doing it by hand. Now I radius the fretboard, kind of help it out a little bit by planing down the edges to the height of the binding, and then using a radius block to get the rest of the way down. This is EVO fretwire, gold fretwire, and I bought it months ago. I've just had it enough in my shop to do 1 guitar worth. And of course they don't make this anymore. The people who made this fretwire don't have the materials they need to continue making it. I guess wherever it comes from in the world, they had a lot of difficulty getting it, so they've announced that they don't make it anymore. Those are the side dots I'm putting in. Actually, this material that I'm putting in there came with the parts from my 1st guitar, so they sent me plenty, so I probably still got enough to do a few more guitars if I decide to do white. Here's just a shot of the finished neck before I glue it on. So I gotta check these angles again like I was mentioning earlier, and you can see here that face is wondering how the measurement there got a millimeter higher than I wanted it to. So to get it back down, I ended up flossing the front of the neck a little bit and tried to feather it out and make it sit down flat again. And that was after getting that gap out of the heel cap, so I had to floss again. So it took a little while, but I eventually got it right. And this is kind of a stressful step. You got to get the glue on there, put the neck on, get the bolts in, and then get the clamps on, and then get all the glue squeezed out up, and hope you didn't miss any. I just used 2 F-style clamps. I'll tape a caul to the first one and leave it over to the side long enough, far enough over so that I can fit the second clamp on there. And that caul just goes right past the upper transverse bar. It sits on the patch right above it. Here's the bridge. Like I mentioned, it's Malaysian Blackwood. And again, I like to start with a square edge. That's going to be the top of the bridge. There's that little block plane I was talking about. That one and that number 5 low angle jack plane are all I've used for all 3 of my guitar builds. Like I said, it would be nice to have some more, but one day I'll expand. Try something else. That template is the second. I saw on the front of it said Bridge 2.0. It's just the second bridge template I've made. The first one was just a Martin style. So this time you saw this. If you saw my second guitar build, I used the same shape on this one. I just tried to do a little bit more design on this one compared to number 2. After cutting it out on the bandsaw, I shaped it on the oscillating spindle sander. And when that was done, I drilled the starter holes, or I guess the holes for the bridge pins. Those holes will eventually get widened out to fit the bridge pins. And you can see that's just a, it's been shaped. No decoration to it. But you can see in this shot, I put in the radius on the bottom, but you can see I've already radiused the top of the bridge. Here I'm cutting the saddle slot, and then you'll see this shot coming up from the left. And you can see the bottom. I put a little bevel on the bottom just to try to add a decorative touch. And here it is sanded up to like 400. And that's the end of the video. Actually, while I was recording this sanding part, the video cut off on me. And that's when I knew I had to just go ahead and make a part 2. Thanks for watching. So glad you stuck through all the way to the end, those of you who did. And I'll see you in the next part. Bye.